All right, as folks continue to join us, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia with Politics and Prose. We're live with DaMaris B. Hill discussing Breath Better Spent, Living Black Girlhood. We've just put a link in the chat column so you can get the book directly from us at Politics and Prose. And I wanted to mention we have lovely signed book plates from the author. Thank you, DaMaris, for those. So if you purchase the book through us, you will get that lovely signed book plate. If you have a question this evening, we are really encouraging you to drop questions throughout in the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. So if a thought occurs to you, just drop your question right in there. We'll be taking those throughout our time tonight. Additionally, we're glad to enable closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To enable captions, click the CC live transcript icon at the bottom of the screen. And we do want to thank all of you out there for being with us this evening. We're very thankful to our family of loyal customers who keep our business and our spirits afloat. And here's a bit about this great new book. In Breath Better Spent, DaMaris B. Hill hoists her childhood self back onto her shoulders, together taking in the landscape of Black girlhood in America. At a time when Black girls across the country are increasingly vulnerable to unjust violence, unwarranted incarceration, and unnoticed disappearance, Hill chooses to celebrate and protect the girl she carries using the narrative in verse style of her acclaimed book, A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, which you can also get from us. We have it here, to revisit her youth. There, jelly sandals, double Dutch beats, and chipped nail polish bring the breath of laughter. In adolescence, pomegranate lips, turntables, and love letters to other girls' boyfriends bring the breath of longing. Yet these breaths cannot be taken alone. And as she carries her childhood self through the broader historical space of Black girls in America, Hill is forced to grapple with expression in a space of stereotype, desire in a space of hypersexuality, joy in a space of heartache. Paying homage to prominent Black female figures from Zora Neale Hurston to Whitney Houston and Toni Morrison, DaMaris invites you to walk through this landscape too, exploring the spaces, both visible and invisible, that Black girls occupy in the national imagination, taking in the communal breath of girlhood and asking yourself, in a country like America, what does active love and protection of Black girls look like? DaMaris B. Hill, PhD, is the author of A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, which is an NAACP Image Award finalist, The Fluid Boundaries of Suffrage and Jim Crow, Staking Claims in the American Heartland, and has also written a lot of beautiful poetry. As with her creative process, Hill's scholarly research is interdisciplinary. She's an associate professor of creative writing at the University of Kentucky and a former service member of the United States Air Force. On behalf of us at Politics and Prose, please join me in welcoming DaMaris B. Hill. DaMaris, thank you so much for being here. What an honor.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and taking time to check in on Breath Better Spent. I appreciate it. Okay, so tonight we're going to be together for a longer amount of time. And I consider this a treat because it's going to allow me to read some longer poems. So everybody hang in there, and we're going to take time in between poems to answer some questions. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm not going to look directly at the chat because oftentimes I will read the chat and not even speak out loud. So because I am imperfect in that way, thank you to everyone who is already here. Thank you to everyone who is coming. I love you and thanks for the support. In this reading, I'm going to begin with the preface. At this moment, I am a writer who lives and works a teaching job in Lexington, Kentucky. This is a place that has little love for me and the Black girl self that I carry on my shoulders. These feelings have intensified since the murder of Breonna Taylor and the subsequent attempts to smother public outcry regarding her murder, such as the political attacks against Attica Scott that criminalize her professional responsibilities as a legislator. When I speak of love, I speak of a community and a type of nurturing environment that allows my writer self and my Black girl self to live uninhibited. Love and nurturing are essential parts of the human experience, A secure foundation of love and nurturing bears many gifts. Imagination might be the greatest of them. I have named this book Breath Better Spent Living Black Girlhood. The conceptions of breath are central to this book. Every breath in physical or sacred form, every laugh sounding like a giggle or a thunder, every whispered joke or secret, every currency of gossip, every prayer I utter or the prayers uttered for me, every gasp, every praise, every squeal or sound investments. Good time spent in girlhood. So take it in. Breath is both individual and profoundly communal, particularly in the form of language. Breath is a type of life force, one that is both physical and spiritual. This book, like life, is cyclical. It is a kind of Sankofa, a kind of return to the Black girlhood self that knows and loves me deeply, nurtured by a range of emotions, knowledge and experiences of Black girlhood, some of which I mentioned previously in the preface. I needed to remember this self. I needed to remember the self that survived the 1980s and the 90s, a time of greed, of excess, of perverse poverty, a time when girls were the caviar of more powerful and often wealthy men who have become the embodiment of success and have modeled the expectations of modern masculinity. Breath Better Spent Living Black Girlhood extends from the collective knowing of Black girl culture. These poems explore the public and interior lives of Black girls, visible in institutional spaces like schools, and invisible spaces like home or the imagination that Black girls occupy in American culture. In this book, I'm asking you to hoist your humanness, particularly that part of your life that connects with your youthful self. And during this activity, you may encounter a Black girl on my shoulders. If you are very lucky and even more human, we may invite you to journey with us. So I'm going to begin by reading one of my host's favorite poems, Beloved Weirdo. Beloved Weirdo, you are not digging this book about a slave girl and her incidents. The pages read about her early knowing of all things. Meanwhile, you ain't got a stitch of sense. If you did, you would have put that book down and hit that boy, asking you if your name is Beloved and if you are going to be like Setha and kill the newborn baby he wants to put in you. Is he the weirdo watching in on you and your bestie leaving the woman's clinic? You wish you would have gone wild as the wind on him for prying. Instead, you go deaf and dumb thinking on it. Your mind wanders into a book. You think on asking Miss Harriet Jacobs, how does a girl learn to be a slave? Does a snake bite you and leak venom until you fall crippled and spasm? Zombie you into a slave? If no, then you got to swallow a butterfly and let it flutter in your throat, smother your words until you become a slave. Do you let the butterfly kick you way up into the tonsils? This might make your eyes rummage the floor for cracks and force you to be humble. Can a slave be made from a butterfly that avoids windows, avoids light? Does that butterfly become a bat under a girl's collar? Or do you crawl under the hoof of a horse named Andrew Jackson to become a slave? The horse galloping and neighing at your earlobes, dirt in with the blood. To be a slave, would you have to take your ribs and fashion Andrew Jackson's hooves with ivory shoes? Would the overseers use your teeth to tether and hold Andrew Jackson's shoes in like nails? In the cradle of your black ringing neck, do you offer the nag a pedestal and curtsy at the mare's master? Just curious, not dying to know. Another one of the histories I'm going to read today is the history of Jarena Lee. And she was like one of the first female ministers in the AME church. And so here I'm playing with how other girls might have seen her, and these ideas of Black girlhood that extend beyond age and are not limited to a time below 18. So Jarena Lee, a platypus in a petticoat. God knows this woman. Jarena Lee, righteousness, lightning flooding into her ears. Your mama calls it early. You got a mouth on you. Your prayers like brackish, whirling echoes. Your mouth is a river that won't lie still. The old woman at the dock warns, I smell gills under your collar. Men say your feet too big for you to be a lady. You got feet like Elijah, the kind with wings. The men snarl and snort like the messenger Hermes done left a wish list in their nostrils. You are womanish when your sermons spill from your mouth like rugs laid on streets of gold. Holy men will boast, name you Paul, and wish you limp at the hip. You are known to have good sense and a better swagger. You, the woman with feet like fins on Jonah's whale and a greater mouth, carrying God's words like 2 fish and 5 ladles worth of a drinking gourd. You look like a platypus in the garden to the bishops. They say you, a spectacle, a slideshow, doo-wopping behind the wood of a cross. Curse you. Jealousy seeks to cleave you, dividing the living in two. Church mothers smocked in white will whisper, watch her, Reverend Jarena Lee, like that Jacob, wrestling a pulpit out of the paws of stingy angels. So thanks for listening to the histories. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna go into some of the semi-autobiographical poems now. And I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna read 2 poems that are near and dear to my heart. The first is entitled Hotter Than July. Hotter than July, you sit on 2 clouds of bees, honey storms in place of your hips. Your waist is an unripe watermelon, a tense and tight drum. You carry daisies for breast with dandelion eyes. Summer is skipping away, every radio humming static. Electric is July, hotter than you remember, which is why you pray for her return. Carrying sweet onions in the hot grease of your armpits, salt and soda crackers in the creases of your neck. July is the 7-Eleven of your childhood, fluorescent. Your jelly sandals are neon, your panties washboard and starch white, snapping hand game rhythms with your belly button. The driveway is your playground, littered with Christy dolls and cordless curlers. In the attic, you play with your vanity. You pretend it is a crib. You skip circles around a stool, sit on top of it, blue magic hair goo on the back of wrist. You pick at a face mirror, you blow on it to reveal the musings of your mustache. You karate kick and ankle it to the air, flash freeze, there. You tiptoe balance between chipped toenail polish and your need for October. Middle school is a distant dinner guest. It is July and you are still a girl. You wrestle back the pink folds of your body, cuss God for holding the woman in you for ransom. You beg for the blood. You want it rushing, shiny, big and lush like your hair, enough to uppercut yourself in the tum, blood enough to inspire envy. You want it lava hot and licorice sweet. You want the boys to tell you that you smell like rusting quarters. Rumor has it that a girl's first blood is chocolate. You want it enough to chew Big Red while chomping on Cocoa Puffs and Pop Rocks. You want blood enough to make friends with the witches among the ordinary women. You run relays to the store for these hussies. They drink ice cold Pepsi without staining their laundry, always hanging their rusty drawers dashed between the sheets. So this is the time that I want to thank the urban bush women, Soul Hot, Saving Our Lives, Hearing Our Truths, an institute started by Ruth Nicole Brown, Urban Bush Women started by Joale Zolar, and the Colored Girl Museum, founded and directed by Vashti Dubois, for helping to create experiences for me that would allow me to stay in touch with my Black girlhood self. And finally, in addition to all of my beloved nieces and nephews and family, I want to thank the participants of the Giggles, Guts, and Glitter technology camp that I had a while back. I chose to leave their names out of the book, but I miss you guys. I love you guys, and thank you for a wonderful summer. This might be the best time to take questions. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. One of my first questions, I did want to know, can you tell us a little bit about how the name Giggles, Guts, and Glitter got chosen? I was so curious reading that.
So it is a running joke between, so I'm the mother of a son, right? And one of the running jokes among some of my friends and I is that if I had a daughter, she would be born pure glitter and toenail polish, right? Like she would just be nail polish and glitter, like nothing else. And so when I thought about like all the things that girls are made of, when I was thinking of a name for this camp, because they received, in addition to receiving computers and other technological tools, that was one of my main concerns when having this camp. I also had them printed like computer sleeves for each of their technology tools. And so we needed a name. So I was like, girls are made of giggles, guts, and glitter.
I love that. I do want to encourage our audience members, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. One that I have, so in the preface, you describe just a bit about growing up, and you talk about moving through different locations and spaces, and you talk about these different collaborations you've had with the urban bush women, who I recognized that I was like, that's amazing. And just all of these different people who have been inspirations to you, as well as maybe had inspired the Black Geniuses, the first section of this collection.
Mm-hmm.
And you also describe yourself as an interdisciplinary artist. When did all of that start coming together? When did you know that you really liked using these different mediums and collaborating with different voices, different artists to really put a collection together? And do you think that may have also been inspired by these different locations you described growing up, these different experiences?
Yes, I always, so there are two answers. The most, I would say the truest and most sincere answer is that I'm going to get in so much trouble. I don't believe in genre and categories in the ways that most people believe in them. Mm-hmm. I never have. So when I was a girl, like beauty is beauty, fun is fun, joy is joy. Mm-hmm. So whatever it took to make that, I was willing to put together. I was also like a surrealist at a very young age, like probably like 10, I was introduced to Dolly in my aunt's home. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. When Michael Jackson's Thriller came out, my favorite song, bar none, on the album was Human Nature. I was like such a weird little kid. I had no idea that what I was liking in that was jazz. Because Quincy Jones wrote Human Nature. So it was like a jazz composition. But I didn't have language for that. I didn't have language for surrealism. What I did know is that the other people that were good at art, I was different from them. So I didn't think I was good at art for a long time. because I was like, not just the weird artist, I was like the weird artist of the artist. Right. And so I spent a long time double life in like who I was as an intellectual and creative person was not who I was socially at all.
Mm.
It was, I mean, my
But
closest friends knew. They'd be like, you are so crazy. But it not at school. I didn't reconcile those two personas way until after my 20s, until I got ready to pursue my PhD. Like I was teaching higher education before a lot of my friends knew, like social friends knew, like only my close friends knew. And then people were like, did I see that you had a publication somewhere around like by Harvard or something? I was like, and it'll be like at a dance club or something. I was like, shut up. Let's, keep
follow up to that. Do you find then that you are more expressive through your work than you are in social circles? Like, are you inhabiting different selves?
Yeah, I'm trying to reconcile them. So I'm really good at them being together now. But it did take a lot of work. Like I've been writing poetry since I was probably around 9, and I was hiding it. And my parents didn't find out that I was interested in writing till I won a prize at 28. And then that's when I finally told them. And then even then I was like, I want to be like Toni Morrison. And so like, yeah, it wasn't something that people knew for a very long time.
Thanks for that. I love that idea of reconciliation, like of selves, and that's something we could all do more of. My final question before we move on, as we get into this middle section where you're talking about it being more semi-autobiographical, and because this is a collection about girlhood, what was your process like going back to your own childhood, maybe, to access some of this? Did you go through photo albums, or did you try and like recall memories? Where were you going in memory?
All of that. And I still have all of my friends from middle school. And I have one friend that I've had for 3 generations. So in a very kind of realistic but also surreal way, I kind of still live in my Black girlhood in that way. My friends have always meant so much to me that I am lucky enough. Like, I'm really close to someone now that I've known for about 28 years, but I've known her family for about 38 years because I was friends with her cousin first. So, yeah, that's how it goes. But also like participating with the urban bushwomen and thinking about what brings me joy and what makes me happy. Hanging out with the girls in Giggles, Gluts, and Glitter, participating in Soul Hot and remembering the type of creativity that happened in those collective moments of girlhood where they were less regulated and less monitored. And I think all of my experiences with the Color Girl Museum, with the Urban Bushwomen, with Soul Hot and others, even, like some of my closest friends are in their 70s, like, and we have Black girlhood moments. Like we giggle all the time. Like one of them is nicknamed Bubbling Brown Sugar, and my nickname is Delicious. And like when we play cards, that's who we're playing as those nicknames and as those giggling girls.
I so appreciate that. And right before we move on, just what you're saying about not trying to put yourself in any genre or category. We maintain these connections with people longer, it seems, when we're able to meet each other where we're at and to have these moments of girlhood, like you're saying. What might we hear from you next, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I'm going to read a longer poem entitled Born Again and Again, and it's for my maternal grandmother, Edith Walker Lowe. And the semi-autobiographical poems are also very surreal, like some of the other work that's happening here. And they usually start from like a kernel of truth. So the kernel of truth in this one is that when I was 3 years old, a drunk driver hit my parents' car, and I nearly died. So and I was talking to my friend about that accident one day, and I was like, yeah, like I was like 3 the first time I died. He was like, oh my God, you got to put that in a poem. So he inspired me to really write about the situation. So born again and again, premonition. My father's life will be a jigsaw puzzle, double-eared in irregular pieces, a portrait of a man your father will never admit he knows. Your father will push away from the table. The perfume of Jezebels will howl in his robes. Your father will abandon his vows. Your father's congregation will hiss, coil around him, and sting him in 2 dialects. Opening scene. I am 3 the first time I died. Your flesh is a cleft between the dashboard and the car floor. Glass and concrete are pebbling in your freckles. Your grandmother will leave paradise, spill oceans, and frack mountains to get to you. The doctors will see her levitating in hospital lighting. You will wave to her from the darkness. Part 3, how the body functions. Resurrection is not painless. The eyes will land first, doing the work of the heart, because the eyes have more muscle. Your tongue is languid, the last to make it back and the most divine. She is the strongest muscle you know, because you have a twin grandmother tongue, the one like the one you witnessed overthrow antiquity. Scenes from the grave. Speaking of Africans who can fly, ask Hester Prynne about the lick of tar at her wrist. Ask Tituba of Salem, what can she spell? Ask Baby Suggs to preach a sermon about how beloved found her way into this world. Your woman tongue can hoist bodies into heaven when it dances from the margin of a brook, taking her old place. Foreshadowing. For years, your father will have faith in the armor of manhood and fornicate with the idea of being human. Your father will abandon his family a little bit every day, and for longer spells in the evening, your father will swear he is working. It is darkest when your daddy ain't home. It will be midnight when you realize that your father is unholy. The Ark of Miracles. My grandmother begged for my life, not miracles. Your grandmother is an itinerant God when she raises you from the dead. So what if your hips arrive before your knees? Spend the life she gave you tucking your left hip bone into the socket of your liver. Your kidneys will be hourglass stacked, and your lungs will be cupped into your forearm. Imagery. The roof of my mouth is a tabernacle of polished jewels. Your tongue has an affinity for strays. She calls for the long dead, sees them fading in and out of living room armchairs, or they are ghosts that live in your human nature poster, or the haints that mime your name from your reflection in the mirror. Being born again ain't easy. Opening dialogue. At 3, your daughter is dead. The words puzzle your father. An EKG machine eulogizes you in Morse code. Your ventilator plays a funeral march of AFib rhythms. The second time you are born, you have no navel, no fur, no veil. You break your mother's tomb of expectations. You don't walk through walls. You furk from behind the door, eyes doing the work of the heart, the tongue, excuse me. Part 8, symbolism. Tongue lingering. Resurrection is merciless excruciating like every other mystery. You wake to testify, cry in the bosom of a woman who has waited for her girlhood self in the looking glass. You witness how she force-fed, choked down love, following the drums of her grandmother's prayer, licking sweat out of the palm of demons, combating the weapon most men fear, the womb. The first birth is war. Flashback. The second birth is worship. Your first spirit, your grandmother, hovers over you, speaking holy tongues into death's canals, where you are the beloved orphan of the ungodly. The doctors tell her breath is better spent on the living. You hear your grandmother's prayers in your nostrils because your ears are doing the work of the eyes. Your eardrums are stained in light. Static characters. Cage birds sing. Like Maya Angelou and so many women before you, you once sat in the children's section of a colored Methodist Episcopal church. It is the same procedure when you are tied to the hospital bed with bars. There are no lavender taffeta hospital gowns. There are tattered morgue sheets seamed into your wounds with bloody dressings. They smell like compost under your nails. Point of view. Are there instructions about how to make a father? You go to the first book you know, your family Bible, thumb through Exodus, ask the Jews about young fathers. Your God has a chosen people and no sons. Did your father waste 40 years, 2 generations in the wilderness? Moses has grandchildren and dies before Israel, more humble than any other man. Setting that illuminates the character. Black girls have a disposition for shapeshifting. Did you know that the matter molding technology of your grandmother's prayers is genetic? Your doctor is old and untold, cursing you with his jabber jaws, daft to the power of the tongue, the muscle that dances back and between the sides of the living. Your twin tongue will soon be cackling about your future from the stories of what he deemed dead. Allegory. My breathing is burdened by listening beyond prayer. The doctor tells your father, if you are alive, that you will never walk again. Tells him for you, talking will be impossible. This doctor is a ringmaster of lies. He is not skilled in the acrobatics, ignorant of the buoyancy of your Black girl legacy, the arts of adaptation, the arithmetic that rolls in your neck. Connotations. Shug Avery is the finest pastor I know. She dances like she marching. Her voice is a shiny trumpet on the 7th day of Jericho. She preaches every Sunday like it's Jubilee, a sermon sweet with forgiveness in every song. She belches in beatitude. Help it are those that love the broken and the whole. None of their children, nor any of their ancestors, nor any of themselves shall be despised. Deleted chapter. Zora's Janie nearly died from grief when she left her grandmother's home, and you didn't come back until you had buried the sudden dead. The sun sets. You will tell your best friend about it without grief. You are young and will go too quick for worries. You will leave sodden and bloated, eyes flung wide open in judgment. The sun is gone, but you look to the footprints in the sky. Falling action. My father missed the day seminary taught about Mount Sinai. In the Old Testament, God is not always present. Your father embraces the covenant, the gift of the Torah. Your father's 10 commandments are made from the marrow of the living. Your father says the laws of men are not the ways of God. Being born again is a religion of being forgiven. Cast away are the debts of sin. Metaphor. My grandmother is a Holy Spirit. She comes to you like a mighty rushing wind. She appears before you, arms spread wide and running, waiting to embrace you. You can see the starlight in her mouth. You can count each of Ezekiel's 4 wheels. You recall this world and the afterlife. You tumble toward her, a blazing chariot, crying out in a ring shout for power from above. Allusion to the theme. I am the prophet of Glossalia, the twice-born girl, the love child of Lazarus, with skin like brick and tar. I remember when I met the Lord, spray painted her name upon the Tower of Babel, tagged our secret names. God and I are gossiping when she reminds the Holy Spirit that one people speaking in one tongue makes nothing impossible. I'm eavesdropping. My ears collect Iliad stones and angel fire. Resolution. Anything you love will not leave you forever. Beloved makes a trip across the darkness, across the rivers, to the shores of the living and the loved. She knows the way. She's sick of waiting in purgatory, where she sits, listening to Setha tell the story about Denver's birth, too much to forget. Beloved is gilded by the pink tongue of her grandmother, Baby Sills, the one who kneels down next to beloved, the granddaughter, dead baby with her throat cut and praise. Okay, we should probably take a break now. That was kind of long.
Oh, one thing I hate about Zoom is we can't get the applause or the snap. So I'll give you some. Thank you so much for that. Yes, let's do break for questions. There's so much to dig into. Our audience members, if you have questions, drop those in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will grab them. DaMaris, one thing that's really striking, not only about that piece, but about this whole collection and your work is you have such a unique and a potent way of like characterizing and depicting the body in your work. I'm sure you get this question all the time.
You're the first person to ever talk to me about that.
Well, I want to hear if you have general thoughts on that, but also even when we were talking about how much I love your piece Hotter Than July, it feels like there's a way to use words that are not like defining the thing as euphemism, which reduces the physical experience. And yet we have verse and we have metaphor and imagery that's not necessarily talking about the exact, physical anatomy of what we're talking about, but yet is more potent and heightens the physicalization of it. I don't know. It just occurred to me as you were reading, like that there's that difference. So that was word vomit from me, but can you talk about how you're thinking about the body as you're bringing it into these works?
I cannot talk about how I'm thinking about the body now. Mm-hmm. One of my most vivid memories of being a little girl, besides, it's crazy, I can still remember this hospital room that I was in and how tall the crib bars were, and the window and the light outside the window. But after I got my body back, I guess as a little girl, I felt that my body was so inhibiting. Like I thought it was so unfair that your mind could be anywhere, but your physical body was holding you in one space. Like I really thought it was like very not just restrictive, like a type of like punishment or sequestering. Like I found myself being angry about that when I was little a lot. Like, why couldn't I just go wherever my mind was going? Mm-hmm. and that was my relationship with my body for a little while. Not that I minded my body, just was inconvenient.
Mm. Mm-hmm. That strikes me, what you're talking about, of like finding like similar or shared like moments of girlhood, or like experiences of womanhood too, because that struck a chord in me, that's something that anyone maybe born identifying in a female body like contends with at a certain point, is like feeling stuck or frustrated by like physical elements of you, just because of the way society treats you or casts you into a
Absolutely.
box. Yeah.
Absolutely. It isn't one person that polices you in a culture that is patriarchal, hierarchical, and in any space in the world where people speak English. But it becomes so much of the policing of the female body, particularly that of a girl, becomes so normative that it is no longer question allowed. That we actually torture ourselves with the thoughts rather than articulate them. I'm sorry if I cut you off. Did I do that?
No, not at all. We have such nice comments in the chat, by the way. Let's see, Patrick says he enjoyed the reading, and Nancy says in all caps, astonishing reading.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, you wrote in the preface, I made one note. I'm trying to get to it. My apologies, everyone. So you say this book may be some long forgotten premise. Years ago, after I freed myself from some of the expectations this quote America had for me, I told my girl self, the one who waited to greet me in the looking glass, that I would bring her with me. At what age were you starting to go through that process of like divorcing yourself of like the expectations quote America has of women, and of Black women in particular, it seems?
Well, I started first with like very intimate surroundings. So everyone in my family, except for me and a lot of my friends, are ordained ministers. So I had a very religious upbringing, and it wasn't labor intensive in terms of religious dogma. I would say that the religious upbringing that I had was more ethical, but I will say that the politics of respectability combined with hypervisibility, combined with the fact that my parents had a sense of social visibility, created an atmosphere of multi-layered expectations that seemed unending. So even though I like the performance of femininity, probably around 12 or 13, I just decided that I wasn't wearing skirts to church anymore. Probably in some attempt to keep people from talking about the way I was dressed. Like they would just have something to say, like, why are you wearing pants? And just go about their day. Like instead of it being an inquiry about my style choices in terms of hair, or a lot of it was related to the politics of physical appearance, because that was just the community I was in, and the type of time it was. So it started then, but I think, and I'm one of the few people in my family to have a child out of wedlock. That was a really big deal. So that was like another way I kind of like bucked expectation. And then, throughout life, everyone has to make the decision whether they are going to live in a state of joy or be happy pleasing other people. I think I started choosing joy early. Happiness is just not going to cut it for me. I want some joy. You know, sustained happiness is really good for some people. I want to work on that joy part though. Joy is different.
Oh, thank you for that. That's incredible, and maybe advice we should all take. Yeah, just some more snaps. If we were in an audience, I feel like there would be applause. One last thought, maybe before we can move towards, a closing piece or closing thoughts from the audience. Well, you talk about sort of respectability and the pressures that society is putting on us that sort of hinder or affect our self-awareness. In Breath Better Spent, there's so many great images of Black women that you've placed alongside your work. Did any of that imagery come into your childhood? Were you seeing these different icons, and did they help you sort of escape some of what was being imposed, or are you finding that joy that you're seeking in some of these icons and these figures that you are inspired by?
So definitely, like, growing up in New Jersey, like I moved from Ohio to New Jersey probably like as a preteen. And when I was in Ohio, I knew of Madonna. Like, Whitney had just come out and I didn't know that much about Whitney. And then we moved to New Jersey and everything was Whitney. And then the difference, right, in like pop Whitney and Madonna is like pop Whitney could really, really sing. And then, so Whitney Houston, and that was like in a time when we didn't have electronic music. People weren't releasing their own music on the internet. So like things that we would do is you would like an album would come out and it might play on the radio for years, right? For years it would be in the rotation. And that was definitely Whitney Houston's first album. And if you really, really liked a song that you heard on the radio and like you weren't young enough, or you were too young to be like, let's say, into album or cassette tape culture, you would literally record the song from the radio broadcast so you could hear the song even more. And Whitney Houston was one of those people that I did that with. So I was thinking about Whitney Houston and the power of her voice and her being a national treasure. And for those of you that don't have the book yet, there are poems to Whitney Houston in the book. There are tributes to Aretha Franklin that I didn't read because you kind of need the whole context for it. But Aretha Franklin was different. As a child, I could not stand Aretha Franklin's voice. I hated it. It was like nails on a chalkboard. It was like screeching brakes. I could not stand Aretha Franklin's voice because it had something in it that I didn't know how to denotate or connotate. I didn't have a meaning or a way of understanding her voice. It wasn't clean. It wasn't neat. It was powerful. It had this stuff in it, like light and concrete at the same time. And I was confused, right, by her voice. And then when I started getting in my 20s, I could hear it. But in my 30s, like, I surrendered to it. And I was like, this is like the most grown up and gorgeous voice that you could ever have. And I think the difference is the people that I was listening to when I was coming of age and younger that had commercial success were cultivated to have commercial success. I think Aretha Franklin fell into the commercial market, but she wasn't cultivated to have a commercial voice.
Thanks for that. I feel like it's so seldom that we hear from people who talk about like having a different perspective and like coming around to different things as time goes on. Like everyone's in a camp of, I either ultimately like dislike this forever, or I ultimately like this forever. There's so few people who talk about like processes in our discovery, in our tastes. Um, I have two questions from the audience before
Okay.
maybe we find a final piece, if we could hear from
Sure.
you one last time. All right, one is from Jeanette, who wants to know, have you read the book Black Joy by Tracy Michael Lewis Giggets,
I have
or
not.
heard of it?
I
Mhm.
have not, but I will be sure to check that out. Thank you. Is there
Yeah.
anything you want to add about Black Joy? I like Black Joy.
We just had an event with the author, so you can find that book and our recording from our event with Tracy Michael Lewis. To everyone watching out there, just go to politics-prose.com, search Black Joy. You can find it there. Let's see, from an anonymous attendee. Let's see, as a man, how do we support and show up for the amazing Black women in our lives and challenge social norms to create a better place for Black women? And as a father of a young girl, how do we create an environment that fosters her growth while creating security and safety?
Well, I think I don't have all the answers to that, but I think what the book is doing is posing questions about how we are interrogating what we think we know and how
Mhm.
it impacts the people that we want to listen most to, right? And
Mhm.
I think from the inception of a capitalist society, all bodies are commodified in that society. But the bodies of Black girls, because of the intersections of maybe age, gender, race, and sometimes economics, a capitalist society may render a Black girl disposable, worthless, or another piece of commodity to trade for some other sense of power or wealth. And if we do not interrogate that, right? Because these are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years of beliefs that we have to undo. But I think if you care about somebody, then you grow to listen to those people rather than assuming the position that society has introduced you to. And I think a prime example of that is like, the ways that we may, like, for a black lack of a better term, police the way little girls dress, right? And in an effort to protect her innocence, and to avoid a type of sexualized gaze on a physically and mentally immature person. But I believe a little girl can be wearing a hooded onesie and everything on her covered. If someone is interested in sexualizing a girl, they will do that. That type of behavior is not the responsibility of the girl to police, but the responsibility of the protectors around her.
Agree with you 100% there. I'm seeing agreement from our audience members too. DaMaris, do you think we might hear a closing piece from you before we have to say goodbye this evening?
Sure. There were so many things that I wanted to read. I'm deciding between two pieces
Mhm.
that are coming out of the back of the in search of portion. Okay, I'm gonna read Not a Story. Bring Back Our Girls. This is not a story, but old as creation, dark as the Middle Ages, dark as the dawn of the European Renaissance, dark as the discovery of new worlds, dark as gold cover in espresso stains of first menses, dark as the most beautiful Sudanese princess, dark as oil out of the Middle East, dark as diamond mines in Cape Town, dark as us. The bark of ancient trees on the seas of South Carolina, dark as those who still call themselves marooned on the Canary Islands, dark as the Cimarrons in the mountains of Colombia, as those who hid in the great dismal swamp, dark as Haitian Mambo mothers spitting tobacco in the faces of genteel men tearing at their skirts, dark as the heart of war in the name of wealth, dark as the coldest day in winter, dark as the shadows of the northern lights, dark as a cobra's skin and the venom pulsing, dark as the nostril of a caged bird through the eye of a snake, dark as the heart of a man who would tell a nation to shoot Lysol into their veins like dope, dark like greedy men who tell you that your grandparents want to die for you because they want you to be a consumer zombie gliding through the dark of any superstore, dark and hard as the pavement where Jill Nelson wrote, Trump equals plague, in chalk to save our dusking lives, dark as self-induced ignorance, dark as our decency fermenting and rotting in instant grits, dark as the inside of our bellies as we sit here wondering and well removed from the violence of over 200 girls being ripped from their chairs, torn out of a physics lab, tossed into the truck stained in blood and the grit of gunpowder, dark and heavy as the otherness, dark as the doors of the bank of vaults underground, dark and heavy as the stillness of this page. And who among us would have the courage to run? Dark as the birthing closets where Yanfu keep life secrets that splint the economies of empires. Rape has always been a war strategy. Has there always been a broken soldier's reward? Dark as the ore mined to make the nickel you will use to buy this book. Dark as the ink of the contract used to bind this book. Dark as my rage about these children, my heavenly host of girl children, stolen and sold to swell the pockets of greedy men with hearts black enough to be poisoned with nostalgia they want for the days when human flesh was flashy currency.
Thank you so much, DaMaris. It should be noted to our audience that that is from the third and final section of the book, In Search of the Colored Girl, where DaMaris goes into some of these stories and captures some of these missing girls. The entire collection is called Breath Better Spent, Living Black Girlhood. The author is DaMaris V. Hill. DaMaris, thank you so much. What an honor, what a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Folks, you can find the link to grab the book from us at Politics and Prose in the chat column. DaMaris did send signed book plates to us, each with a little message. They are truly unique. We hope you will order the book from us or stop by one of our stores. And until then, we hope everyone out there is staying safe, staying strong, and of course, staying well read. DaMaris, again, thank you so much,
everybody. And if you have other questions, please feel free to email me in my socials or on my website. Just look for DaMaris Hill. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram and all of those other social places. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Politics and Prose.
Thank you.